Agatha Christie's Third Girl was written in the mid-60s, in exactly 1966, and this is a Poirot novel. It's one of the later Poirot-Oliver, Ariadne Oliver kind of collaborations. She sort of replaces Hastings in this last decade of Christie's writing of Poirot. And there actually are a lot of characters who are recurring in this from Poirot's world. First of all, we see a bit more of George, his impeccable butler who always has the right thing to say, always knows what people would rather drink besides those awful tisanes that Poirot drinks. Miss Lemon is also in this one. And of course, Miss Lemon and Miss Oliver also share a different character in the Christie collection of characters. They both worked with Parker Pyne in that earlier collection of short stories. We also have Mr. Goby, who is the man who Poirot relies on to find out information on people. He's the one who sits and seems to be always addressing a piece of dust on the ground or a chair off in the distance. Never looks you in the eye, but notices a great deal. Is a very unassuming sort of fellow. Third Girl takes its title from one of these. Christie was really good at kind of picking up on what's going on in her world and certain trends and different ideas that were happening. And the idea of a third girl is that just this. You have a woman in London, she's a working girl, respectable, gets a flat with a friend. In order to help make ends meet, they often hire or advertise for a third girl, which is usually a girl they don't know anything about. So this third girl comes along to live with them to help cover the rent. That's it on the surface. Third girl in Christie's hands becomes something much more. The idea of this story, the premise of this story, is that a young girl named Norma Restorick, who's a bit of a lost 60s girl, but drugged up half the time and, kind of dirty and part of this sort of swinging 60s London art house culture. She comes into Poirot's office one morning and sits down and says that she needs to talk to him because she thinks she might have murdered someone. And Poirot, of course, is very interested in this. He rarely gets someone who comes in because they think they might have murdered someone. But then she takes one look at him and she says, well, you're a lot older than I thought. You're too old. I can't talk to you. And she runs off and disappears for most of, the next 2/3 of the novel. And this woman, she's the third girl in an apartment of 3 women. She shares an apartment with Claudia Rees Holland, who is a very respectable secretary who works in the city, and in fact is Norma Restorick's father's secretary. And then we have the second girl, Claudia's friend, Frances Carey, who is kind of a bohemian artsy type. She's serves as a model for one of their friends, David Baker, who's kind of an up-and-coming artist in the London area. And so you have these girls, and they're wondering what's happened to Norma. She seems gone. She's lost. Ariadne Oliver meets up with all of these people at a party because she's an author, so she goes to these kind of artsy parties sometime. And she's the one who suggested Poirot to Norma. The problem is that as Poirot starts to investigate, he can't find any evidence of a murder ever having occurred. So we don't really know what's gone on. There was some talk of someone being shot at, and they think maybe she shot off a gun and someone thought she killed them. But because we don't know where Norma is, we don't know what's going on. At one point, Ariadne Oliver does find Norma sitting and talking with David Baker, the artist, in a cafe, and she follows them, and then follows David, only to find out he's known that she's been following him the whole time, and he turns it on her and follows her. Norma disappears, is found later by a Dr. Stillingfleet, who is another recurring Christie character from an earlier short story, and he's found her as she's just about thrown herself in front of a car, an oncoming car. So she's tried to off herself. Stillingfleet jumps in, gets her, rescues her, takes her to his place. And so for most of the novel, she's there recuperating, and he's trying to help her, and he sees her as sort of this messed up girl who needs looking after and needs to get the drugs out of her system and be taken care of. What's interesting is that Christie does play with this sort of suspension for such a long time of where's the murder? There's no murder. There's we do the very more careful Christie reader will pick up on where the murder has occurred. I won't spoil it for you, but there is a murder that does happen, and actually in this one, Ariadne Oliver is quite active in helping Poirot find clues and figuring things out. Of course, she doesn't quite know the meaning of what's going on. And everything that happens with her that's connected to the plot, it happens as a series of coincidences. A piece of paper falls out from a cabinet that's being removed from the apartment where the three girls live, and it proves to be an important clue. Ariadne just pockets it for the novel. Meeting Norma Restrick at a restaurant and just happening to see her is another sort of coincidence. You could say that Christie's relying too much on this, or you could say that maybe she's intentionally doing this, kind of highlighting the artificiality of the plot. This is, after all, a mystery, and coincidences do occur in mysteries, just much in the same way that you would have coincidences happening in Shakespearean comedy or something like that. It becomes almost a convention that she begins to work with. The other side of this whole thing, besides the bohemian art world of London, is, of course, Norma's family. Her mother and she were abandoned by their father when she was just a little girl. Her father, Andrew, went off to South Africa, ended up in South America, ran off with another woman. And then, a few years earlier, Norma's mother died and she was left alone. The father decided he wanted to be part of her life again and told her he's coming back. Comes back to London to take over the family business. The brothers died, so he's going to take over the family business. Has a new wife that he met, not the woman he ran off with, and they together are trying to help Norma. But, of course, Norma doesn't get along with the stepmother. She doesn't really know her father. She's a bit lost. So you've got all of these domestic issues happening. They all live in the country, except for Norma, who lives in the city. But the Restricks live in the country with Sir Roderick, an aging uncle, and his secretary, Sonia, who could be a spy. We don't know. But this novel just has so many different motifs running through it. One of them, of course, is kind of the lost girl thing that I was exploring with Caribbean Mystery, with the earlier novels. Another, I would say, would be this idea of the third girl, because the third, Ariadne keeps asking about who is Norma. She's this third girl. No one knows anything about the third girl. But then Christie plays a little twist on that at the end that I won't tell you because I don't want to spoil it for you. Other motifs are hair. Ariadne she always has piles of messy hair, and this is the 60s when people are wearing hair pieces and wigs, and so she puts on these different coils of hair to kind of disguise herself at one point, and they keep falling out all over the place, and Poirot picks them up for her gallantly, but is a little embarrassed for her. We also notice Frances Carey's always she's kind of, I don't know if she's this sort of 60s hippie girl, but she's always covering half of her face with this black stringy hair, so she's sort of part of this 60s hip drug culture. And another motif is painting. Just like in Five Little Pigs and After the Funeral, painting has kind of an importance here. And in this case, it's 1960s modern art painting, and portrait painting, and the artsy set. So it becomes quite interesting. The novel itself is a bit slow-moving. The solution could use some work, but it's not a bad book for a later Christie. She really focuses on Ariadne, and I think that, of course, that's always a code for her focusing on herself, and we're seeing how she's sort of relating and feeling out of place in this 1960s London. You can imagine Christie herself having to attend these artistic soirees and not understanding these people, thinking that these young men in velvet kind of Austin Powers type trousers and jackets with these fluffy cravats must think, that she feels very out of touch with things. She kind of enjoys it, but she's like holds it at arm's length, and that makes for an interesting read. I think this novel deserves a bit better than it usually gets. I'm going to give it a 3.75, edging toward 4 out of 5. Next, I'm going to read one of Christie's favorite novels, Endless Night, which takes its name from a